I've had a couple, perhaps joke comments recently saying that Jordan Peterson has told me to clean up my bookshelf. So I've made an effort, at least, although I'm hardly an expert in efficiency matters, to stack the books more efficiently. It's raised a whole lot of questions for me in terms of the way that Jordan Peterson fails to clean his room and what it's supposed to mean. One of his former students has done a whole essay on it, which I can link to. But he essentially says that Jordan Peterson, to some extent, wants to be a spiritual leader and can't embrace that because he's an academic and therefore can't explicitly say his own primary thesis. And I've done a video on this and analyzing the way Jordan Peterson looks at The Lion King, saying that it's a Fisher King movie and he doesn't analyze it as such. His primary idea, or at least one of them, is a Fisher King idea, that what the individual does has ripples into the greater society. And by putting our own spiritual, psychological houses in order, that will affect the rest of the world. I don't know why people are making that comment to me, in that I'm not taking care of my bookshelf, and that symbolizes something I'm presumably not addressing, when I am actually addressing the topic in at least one video that Jordan Peterson doesn't, and therefore I'm not, in that sense, metaphorically failing to clean my room. Physically, I've had all sorts of failures. I've made a small attempt to show how one might better arrange one's books behind me, and that is because usually people put them vertically, and I think that makes the titles a little harder to read because the titles are turned at 90 degrees to one's eyes. This way, they're horizontal, easily read, and one can adjust for the different spine lengths of the books between paperbacks and trade paperbacks, perhaps, by aligning them horizontally so that they more efficiently fill the available space. You don't have as ragged a profile of the tops of the books. The disadvantage is that it can be a little more difficult to pull a book out from underneath the other ones if it's at the bottom of the pile. So this is an arrangement perhaps better suited if one doesn't access the books frequently. There is a physical dimension to Jordan Peterson's problem, however, in that cleaning one's room, putting one's psychological and spiritual house in order, has a physical dimension nevertheless. If you're getting your ideas and your means of looking at yourself and becoming more mindful and knowledgeable and examining what you should fix, that may require books. Books are physical objects, at least if you want to have privacy and use them in the old-fashioned way. So simply cleaning one's room poses problems as to what you do with your books. And if you want to pass them on to somebody else, it's not simply a personal psychological problem that makes that difficult. Our traditional means, at least some of them, of transferring books are breaking down. So it's not simply an individual's problem if it's hard to get rid of books, because our library, for instance, is huge, cost $250 million for a new one in Calgary, and yet it doesn't really hold even as many books perhaps as it used to. When I did my previous video on the Bee Movie, I couldn't access any outside periodicals, even digitally, from that library. So we have this pretty spacious building that seems to be more about promoting the idea of sitting and reading a book than actually doing it. And our used bookstore method has broken down for the most part. It used to be that one could take an in-demand, popular, desirable book and get 10% of the cover price, and now in cash at some outlets. And those outlets are now shut down. The exchange rates, the markup between what the bookstore pays for a book and what they sell it for has gone up a lot. Most of our bookstores have shut down altogether because the ones that have survived have had to do so by increasing their markups to cover the costs of electricity. Electricity has middlemen, and in our city, other costs tacked onto it. So when one pays one's electricity bill, one has to pay one's water, sewer, and garbage collection bills as well. And the electricity itself has various middlemen who pass on the electricity and charge delivery fees for it and various other fees. So it's made some businesses simply disappear. And people are trying to compensate for this loss of what was once our redistribution system for books by setting up their miniature depositories along sidewalks. And this has helped, but it doesn't help you find a specific book and get you in touch with other people if you like the personal element of exchanging books with them and talking about the book as you're doing it. You can meet people sometimes at the depositories when they're picking up a book, which is good. But our system still has a lot to do, a lot to develop in terms of making it more efficient and compensating for all the institutions we've lost, or the institutions that are no longer doing their jobs. And that is not something one fixes solely on one's own. It takes a network. One must build the necessary network to replace the institution that was taken down in order